Um,
Good
yeah.
afternoon, John. John Donovan.
I'm Marty Keller.
And good afternoon, everybody who's joined us here on the Intentional Living podcast. We welcome you to eavesdrop on our conversation. And we talk about one thing, basically. We talk about breaking patterns of behavior that keep showing up in ways I say, I don't want to be doing that. I don't want to be feeling that. I don't want to keep having that thought. And they happen anyway.
Yeah.
They have the the experience of compulsion. And what we do here is we take a look at essentially demystifying those behaviors and looking at rather than fighting them, resisting them, befriending them, making them part of our experience. They're all things that made us who we are today, and then using that newfound friendship to create something new. What is it I want that I don't have?
Right.
This is a process that can help us do that. I I've been doing this work for almost 15 years with you, John, and I've learned a lot. And so I invite the newcomer in particular, if you want to learn more, you can watch our podcasts. We have, I think we have 4 years of podcasts, so there's all kinds of
Mhm.
recorded information. But even better than that, we have meetings. We have 4 meetings a week, all of them on Zoom, and it's the best place to really get the experience that we're going to talk about, or we have been talking about. Um, I had a question from one of our participants recently, and I thought I would raise that here. And that was the question was, why is it that traditional psychotherapy doesn't work the way we do this? What's missing? And I recalled it recalled an experience I had with you when early on when I met you. I don't know if you remember this, but I had met an author who had written a book on what you called integral therapy or integral psychotherapy. And
Mhm.
he was a devotee like I am of the work of Ken Wilber, the integral theorist. And he was in town to do a book signing. And so I arranged for you and him and I to have dinner. And we drove down to Walnut Creek. And
Oh yeah.
um, I remember sitting there. This gentleman, I think he had started a clinic, a live-in clinic, or his expertise was similar to yours in formal training as a drug and alcohol abuse counselor.
Yeah.
And I remember he started talking about what he was doing, and then you jumped in and you said you basically gave him a tutorial on accountability practice.
Yeah.
And I just remember sitting there watching this gentleman and the look of bewilderment and I don't know bemusement on his face was priceless. And I recognized at that time, and that was probably 12 years ago. I recognized at that time that we were dealing here with a completely different approach.
Right.
Um, and as somebody who myself has been through traditional talk therapy for years and years and years, I say at least 30 years. I'd been in therapy before I came to do the work with you. And as soon as I started doing work with you, I abandoned traditional therapy.
Yeah.
And, and the only therapy I did subsequently was the therapy that I did for a couple of years with a childhood trauma healing therapist, somebody who
Right.
actually does work in alignment with what we do here.
Yeah.
So the question is, the question that this person asked was, why doesn't, and maybe it's not the right approach, but let's start there. Why doesn't what is it that we do that traditional psychotherapy, talk therapy, as it's basically considered, why do they miss this? What are they missing that we've got? And in particular, if there's something that you can talk to from your own experience in your specialty of drug and alcohol counseling. Maybe there's
Yeah.
some insights that we can share with people about that.
Yeah. When I first got into drug and alcohol counseling, I read a book by Alice Miller, and I believe it was in that book that she pointed out that 5% of the 2% of the people who wanted to quit were able to maintain sobriety for 5 years, whether they went to counseling or not, whether they went to treatment or not. So Alice Miller worked a lot about and talked a lot about how we treat our children, which is family of origin dysfunction, childhood trauma. And at that time, I was a counselor, and I realized that I was in a therapeutic field who could boast somewhere between 2 and 10% success rate in their, and the model we used was the Minnesota model, Hazelton model of recovery. How I could be in a field where our result was dismal. And this is when I first started learning about accountability for myself. And over the years, well, let me say this first. Just recently, I think it was a Vietnam War, where they started realizing that veterans, war veterans, came back and they actually had a moniker for what the condition was in a stressful war zone, post-traumatic stress. And that was what, 70s, where they started realizing that trauma, unresolved trauma, held in the subconscious, affected the behaviors of the now moment. We could see it real easily with war veterans because they were in a dangerous, obviously dangerous, bullets flying and bombs going off. And nobody was teaching, and nobody knew that the same thing was happening in a family of origin as we were growing up. From when I do my group, I say the conditioning from conception to the present moment is relegated, 9/10 of it's relegated to our subconscious. And in our early years is where we place the trauma or the confusion or the terrified or the I don't know or accusations like screaming and yelling at a little kid because they broke a vase, that child carries, which is complex post-traumatic stress. So Gabriel Mate talks about this too, that the medical profession has very little information, maybe one class on childhood trauma. And then they go on to become doctors and treat illnesses and mental health. And without this ingredient, without this part of the picture. So when all these therapies, talk therapies were developed, this wasn't part of the equation. So the best they could do was talk. They got some results, just like drug and alcohol treatment got some results. And if 2% of the people who wanted to quit maintained sobriety for 5 years, most of the people who want to quit seek help. So the therapeutic community had people coming in wanting something. So their stats, they could say, oh, we have 50% success rate. Well, no, if you zoom out, no, it's still 2 to 10%. And yet it looks like we're doing a good job. It looks like talk therapy was helping people get back re-engaging in their lives. It may have taken a long time, and it worked. When I was in my own recovery and I heard the phrase, this is a cunning, baffling, powerful disease. So my question was, oh, cool, what's cunning, baffling, and powerful? They were just going to tell me. They didn't know. Nobody knew. They would say things like, keep coming back, it works, one day at a time, let go and let God, which is good information. I'm not knocking the information, only it didn't answer the question. So in my early recovery and recovery, in the back of my mind, I wanted to understand cunning, baffling, and powerful. Well, complex post-traumatic stress is um, a condition of the subconscious where it becomes hypervigilant. And anything, any situation, any little thing happening in the current reality could set off a reaction. Um, and again, nobody was talking about the early childhood trauma.
So, so that's just like a returning war veteran experiences when he hears a car backfire or
Yep,
something. It's
yep.
it's as if he's still on the battlefield.
As if he's still on the battlefield.
Hasn't
And
been.
I give the example, I'm in a group of people, I'm talking out of the corner of my eye, somebody rolls their eyes. Now that's as if I'm back as a 3-year-old being berated or whatever was going on that I couldn't uh, uh, process. So
Right,
I stuffed it.
because
So the rolling of the eyes,
mom or dad rolled his or her eyes,
right.
and the
So
message
I'm
you got was, "You stupid kid."
right. So that mechanism we have in ourselves, that alert mechanism, saw rolling the eyes as a death threat, just like the loud noise was imminent danger, drop to the ground.
I'd say, is it okay with you? It's like we didn't just see it; we felt it.
Right. Yeah, actually, the trauma is a felt experience, pre-verbal, nonverbal. We don't have the words for it. So that I found was the cunning, baffling, powerful. Um, all this trauma information is used every time I make a decision. And I have a diagram of the cutaway of the brain, brainstem, midbrain, which is our survival. This is where our instinctual survival is, and our emotional or feeling processors in the midbrain. They are hooked into the adrenaline. There's real. Their reaction has to be real quick because we needed to survive over the millennia to maintain a sequence of life from whenever it started millions of years ago to the present moment. So this device is well healed. It works really well. Only now it's got equated rolling of the eyes as a death threat or a harm going to come. So my reaction, the vet's reaction is drop to the ground. My reaction is either attack that person because I'm big enough to do that now, or leave the room. In my pre-recovery and well into my recovery, I noticed I only had 2 options. I either had to hit it, abuse it, be violent, or leave. Those are my 2 options. I had no other options. That's because the trauma was influencing that decision-making process below my conscious level, that rolling the eyes is a threat. Asking me a question is a threat. I used to wonder why when somebody asked me a question, I would just freak out. I would just flip out. And now I understand that as a child, if somebody was giving me the 3rd degree, like, what did you do that? Where were you? Questions are dangerous. They're hurtful. They cause separation. And for a small child, separation is a death threat, is a away from any semblance of being able to survive because we didn't know how to do it. We didn't know how to get our own food. Okay. So what intentional living and the accountability tree process focuses on is that trauma, and um, and addresses the trauma when the trauma is, how does Peter Levine, recognized and validated. It the trauma, whatever happened to you, is always going to have had happened to you. Okay. Your perception of it now is that you're free of that stuck energy. You be proactive. You validated that was painful as a child. Um, and the regular allopathic community is coming to know that now. And you say you've known me for 15 years. So there's a lot happening in the therapeutic communities that they realized that something they were doing wasn't working. I remember going to a convention back in 2000 something, where one of the speakers, a PhD, just said outright that there's something we don't know. There's something we need to look at because our success rate is dismal. I mean, Marty, even if it were 25%, that's dismal. 25% of the people who want to quit that's dismal. So, in my wanting, there's a better word from that, in my wanting to heal or be different or not be so aggressive or mean, I stumbled upon this mechanism that caused the behavior. And I don't address the behavior. I don't say, well, I'm going to fix that. I'm going to do this different. I'm going to do that. I own where I find myself I mean, and just say it out loud. And that truth, blame free, judgment free, goes into that subconscious and validates it. It's like me saying to my grandson, I see you're frustrated. I see you're angry. I see you're hurt. Boom. Which releases that old energy. It's not there anymore when I make my decision. Different energy is motivating, influencing my decision making process. And I just automatically find myself different. I don't want to say not as mean, but not as mean is still mean to what I know now. Different. The edge is off. I start noticing it myself. When I first noticed it, I had to notice it after I did it. Now I notice it even just coming, just wanting to be expressed, and I can catch it here and go, that's dismissive. Oh, and then that truth, that's dismissive, goes into the subconscious and looks at the motivation for the reaction response, for the drop to the ground, and goes, I'm safe now. I'm not in a war zone anymore. I have advocacy for myself. Child did not have advocacy. They cannot advocate for themselves. They just take what they get. I now know I can move to proaction. I can move to advocacy. I could, or do nothing, take a breath, see what happens. So, and,
You know,
I'm glad we talk about this thing. Every time we talk about one of these aspects and ferret it out the best we can, this topic is huge and complex. It is. There's so many different things that could happen to a particular individual that this will affect. And we got to start somewhere. So
well, and
we talked.
we talked about this before, but it's not just huge and complex, it's foundational. Every
Yeah.
single human being is born into a world of conditionality and potential trauma, and
Yes.
most of us don't avoid it. So
Right. Can't. Yeah.
there's as I've said before, birth itself is traumatic. We start in a trauma, a physical trauma, and
Yes.
so it's foundational because it's universal, and
Yeah.
yet it's something that we have yet culturally, in any culture on the planet, yet to say this is a focus of our way of being, that we're going to create institutions and traditions and entertainment and conversation about healing childhood trauma. We're going to
Right.
tell stories about it. We're going to write myths about it. We're going to do
Right.
cartoons about it. That that is yet to come. And one
Yes.
of the things that, and what you were sharing, that I think is also a distinction between the old psychotherapeutic model or the current psychotherapeutic model and the intentional living, and I saw that in this conversation that you had with this therapist that I
Right.
referred to earlier, is that the the current model has a real element of we know what's right for you in it.
Right.
It has a real um, it has a belief that it has the solution, whereas intentional living has a belief that the individual coming to do the work has the solution within him or herself. And
Right.
the work of the facilitator is to help that person discover that for himself, rather than
Yes.
say, here's what you need to do. Here's the right or wrong of it. And
Yep.
that, again, that's a huge thing, because I remember, I mean, I had some really gifted therapists, but I would walk into that office with a not so hidden belief of, I have to say the right thing to this therapist, or the therapist will yell at me, reject me, make me bad, or whatever. And I don't remember ever being in therapy where that issue was addressed. Not that I was too afraid to bring it up, but the therapist also either wasn't aware of it or didn't think it was important. And so there is that lingering in the atmosphere of, I'm coming to the expert, as opposed to our work. We believe that person doing the work is the expert.
Yes. Yes. It's an empowering environment instead of a let me help you,
Right,
let me fix you. No,
right.
no, 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 no fixing, no helping. This is the information. This is how it works. I will lead you if you want to familiarize you with this process, guide you, and then it's on you.
And
Yeah.
it's partly because we have some fundamental philosophical assumptions, and one of them is nobody's broken, so
Right.
nobody needs to be fixed.
Correct.
And I don't know about you, but I'm sure that's true. How many time people I've worked with who like want to insist they're broken,
Yep.
and some people will even go so far as to try to prove it to you.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And
Yeah. They will.
it's like I don't know how many people I've said to, you can try to prove you're broken all you want, but I don't see you that way.
Right. Yeah.
But the need to prove that you're fixed is just part of it. It's part of your history, and it's like something that you can pay attention to and see if you want to learn something from it,
There you go.
or not. Doesn't matter.
Or not.
And I work with I do one-on-one work with several people. I've been doing it for years, and we were laughing. This one person and I were laughing a couple of weeks ago about how he's stopped trying to get reasons for me to end the working relationship. It's like I now have come to terms with, I'm a valuable person, and that you see me that way. So,
Oh wow.
well, that you
Yeah.
see yourself that way is what I hear.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's because the the current model, and I haven't studied Freud enough to say if that was Freud's belief that, Freud was the expert and people came to him, kind of like the traditional medical model. Like, I'm the expert about the human body, and you coming so I
Yep.
can heal you. Now,
Yep.
that may
Yep.
have some validity in the physical world, maybe. When I had blood clots, I certainly wanted an expert who knew how to remove them, because I couldn't do it.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but whether that works in the psychotherapeutic world that way, I'm not convinced.
Well, if it works slowly and laboriously. Yes. So,
I told you
yeah.
that I mentioned, and I know that you know the background of this. I worked with for a couple of years, a therapist who had expertise in childhood trauma healing, and the work was liberating, and it was powerful. It helped me use it helped me where the accountability tree practice couldn't yet reach
Right.
deep deep inside, to the way deep to the 1 year old, 2 year old experience, which had the sensation of being like really compacted in there,
Yeah.
compacted way down in the shadow. Um, and I think I told you that from time to time when I'm doing the accountability practice, I would actually literally feel like something was choking me, and I couldn't
Yep.
speak.
Yep.
So I went to this therapist, and she helped me tremendously. And but the thing that absolutely blew my mind about her, which had never ever occurred to me with any other therapist, is that she said to me, I think I've done everything I can do for you, and we're we're going to end our working relationship.
Wow.
I never heard a therapist say that before.
Yeah, yeah. Yep.
And it just, I already was very respectful of her, but it made my respect go. It's like,
Good.
she's not here to milk this. She's here
Right.
to, deliver what I asked her to deliver and what she said she could. And once it was delivered, it was done.
Yep. That's very good. Very ethical. I like that.
Yeah. All right.
My goal is to work myself out of a job,
Exactly.
hold a group, and then nobody shows up. And I
Exactly.
go, oh, it's time to make some phone calls to schedule some barbecue parties and
Exactly. Go golf. Go
go
golfing.
golf. Yeah, go golfing. There you go.
Yeah. I mean, I had the same experience when back in my days as a bureaucrat for the state of California. I thought my job was to work myself out of a job.
Yeah,
It's like, and, that's not the bureaucracy's the invisible belief of the bureaucracy is it's our job to keep this job going forever.
right. Which means don't provide a viable solution,
Right.
which is really ironic.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. And again, we could trace all that stuff back to childhood trauma.
exactly.
All of that stuff is, I mean, everything, the world problems,
Everything,
the
everything.
censorship that's going on right now, and the wars, and
Yeah.
Ukraine, and Israel,
Israel and Palestine.
all of that stuff can be traced back to unhealed childhood trauma. Now, I don't say
Right.
that to be glib, because
No,
obviously that's not something that you can wave a magic wand and it's all taken care of.
right.
I mean, this is really hard work. And the thing
Yes,
is, I'm going to say this to the newcomer who's listening, is like, this is not a one and done.
right.
It takes a long time and it takes consistency. And part of it is I've come to understand, maybe you have a different understanding of this, but it's the evidence, it's the one way I could actually begin to understand and appreciate the the emotional violence of my childhood
Yes.
was by how long it's taking to heal the after effects, to
Yep.
heal the trauma. And for most of us, whatever happened in our childhood, we think it's normal. We think it's typical. We don't think it's unusual. If we if
Right.
we have if we have emotional abuse, even if there's sexual abuse, we don't necessarily go, there's something really wrong with this parent.
Right.
We might think there's something wrong with us, but
Right.
it never occurs to us that this is an anomaly, that this is unusual. And so
Yeah.
that's I think part of the challenge of the therapy is to um, generate an appreciation for two things. Number one, the depth and duration of the emotional storms that we experience as kids.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, to appreciate the strength of a little kid to find some way to survive it
Yep.
anyway,
Yep.
and
No
and
matter
pretty
what.
much and pretty much on his or her own.
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah.
you and I have talked that sometimes, like, I was blessed. I had two grandparents that provided a refuge, and I could go to their house once a year and live in a completely different atmosphere of love and acceptance and fun and no hidden agendas. And so I got a taste that this this world that I lived in wasn't the only possible world.
Yeah.
Some people don't even get that.
No. Yeah. I was fortunate to have a grandmother too that I went to.
Yeah. So as we come to the end of our time together, I appreciate your willingness to share some thoughts about this. We wanted to raise this for those of you who are watching this. We wanted to raise this because some of you may have been struggling in therapy for years and years and feeling frustrated. And this is a place where, in our work, you can come and try a different approach and
Yeah.
see whether there's something here that can help you essentially cut the Gordian knot that traditional psychotherapy tends to keep us in. I think I heard, I think it was my other mentor, Ken Wilber, who said that psychotherapy is designed to help us, live with our neuroses,
Yeah.
to accommodate them. And what I've discovered in this work is I've learned to befriend my neuroses. And when I befriend them, everything changes.
Yep.
It's I no longer live in compulsion. I live in choice. As it says at the bottom of the accountability tree on your diagram, I live in freedom.
Yeah.
So, any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
I'm good today. That was glad we had this talk.
Okay. So again, I'd like to invite anybody who's here new or here for the first time. You're new to watching this information. At the end of the podcast, you can find the times and days of our meetings. There are 4 a week. They're all on Zoom, and so the Zoom URL is also there. And please feel free to join us.
Okay. Thank you,
And with
Marty.
that, John, I thank you as always, and I look forward to the next one.
You got it.
Take care.
Mm-hmm.